Chapter 82, Herbert's 100 Harem. God damn it, I'm not in a freaking spy novel, Herbert remarks to himself as he goes over the instructions. The boys in science had found a way to weaponize null. Well, not so much found a way as adapted one of the few currently in effect methods and refining it to a smaller and much more easily controlled scale. A tiny little launcher which primes and shoots tiny disks of tritite that contain null. A very short-range disruption of the local axiom follows, which will drop most races beyond human and completely disable the technology. Effective time is 5 to 10 seconds, but in a fight that can be an eternity. Thankfully, it has a fingerprint lock on it. Anyone but himself or someone not in the approved database will cause the device to simply detonate the null rather than launch the disk, which for anything but a human is a fight ender. Otherwise, the thing was so simple, they had actually adapted most of its frame and launcher from a child's toy. He senses something elusive. He quickly bundles up the null launcher and hides it away. Then there's a knock on the door. To his lack of surprise, it's several of the yaoya teens he's been married to. They had been hiding as they dealt with the guilt. Apparently, it's an angsty teen thing among the yaoya. They're all exceptional at axiom-based stealth, so they use it to hide from the problems they can't deal with. He hadn't chased them down, but Sir Philip had made it part of his training to keep track of them, stealth or not. Unfortunately, he's fairly sure he's been missing things a few times. First time you've been visible today, I think. Are you finally calming down? He asks her, and she flinches at the inadvertent reminder of her sense of shame. I'm sorry, excuse me, she says, before fading away and starting to leave, but he grabs the back of her shirt with a roll of his eyes. This has gone on too long as is. I have 100 brides, and having nearly half of them hiding from me out of a sense of shame is absurd. Yes, you screwed up. There were screw-ups all around. The screw-up is over with, so knock it off and act like you're hefting some, he says, quoting some of the gossip he had heard going around. Asking if a woman's hefting some is the same as asking a man if he's got a pair. Hey, look, we were all tricked and messed with. It's over, and we can only go one way, forward, so let's go, he says, and she blinks in confusion before seeming to start and stop, and then slumping a little in on herself and then standing tall. That was a lot of emotion to pour through in just a few seconds. Well, he asks the slumping girl, who gives him an odd look. We sorta... Can we hunt you? She asks, and his eyebrows go up. In the yaoya mating method, or are we talking for meat? Herbert half jokes, half inquires. Well, technically, we're going for meat either way. One of the nearby and still invisible yaoya remarks. Yes? There's a large public course a few levels down and halfway across the city. It's huge, and we thought we might be able to have some fun. So, a large building or an indoor obstacle course? He asks. It's sort of an indoor border town, plenty to climb and a lot of places to hide and run and mess around in, she says, and he grins. Sounds like fun, Herbert says. I understand if it's too... Wait, did you say yes? Yes, he answers, and she blinks, looks back at the other still cloaked yaoya and back to Herbert. But you... What? He asks. Never mind, she says before the other yaoya begin fading into view. So when do we go? He asks, and she seems confused again. In a half hour, we'll meet you here, she says, and he nods. All right, I'll get my running gear on, he says, and watches them quickly and quietly converse with each other before he heads back into the room. Last time he went out, there was a freaking cult attack. Their use of axiom had nearly killed him, and if not for the backup of a nearby group of soldiers, he would be dead. Field test it is, then, he remarks as he gets his running shoes on and quickly grabs his jacket, which has a few expanded pockets. They actually fit the items in them perfectly, but it also flattens the jacket and makes the weapons completely undetectable. knife, pistol, and null launcher all go in. Then he adds in a shotgun and a few flashbang grenades. Overwhelming firepower is as good as a security blanket to a nervous soldier. He is quickly gathered up by the Yaoya girls and they lead him out of the embassy guest quarters. They all lead him onto one of the larger Airbuses flying around. They don't leave their defensive formation around him, and few, if anyone, people actually see him for the crowd of girls. But this has to be conspicuous on a scale that everyone who so much as glances this way has to know there's a guy here. The trip takes nearly 3 hours to cross the city. The speeds the bus are going at is just shy of the sound barrier when it's really moving, but the city is just that freaking huge. He once again pays attention to the massive tiers the city seems to be made of, each one with axiom-based enhancements on them so that natural sunlight gets to every level in spite of the fact that basic physics says past the first few there should be nothing in the way of natural light. He lets out an impressed whistle when he discovers that this whole giant jungle gym sort of place they're taking him to is actually an entire tier in of itself, lower leveled and with deliberately weaker axiom runes to keep too much light from getting in. There are 4 entrances to this town-sized playground and he's led to the nearest one. Hello, welcome to Defenestration Nation, where half the fun is on the exits, the ticket seller exclaims. Defenestration Nation? Why on earth is it called that? Herbert asks out loud. They've got special break-apart windows here with crash pads below them, so you're encouraged to dive out of the upper floors to make getaways and escapes. The whole place has an axiom field that disperses impact damage over a large area. No matter how far you fall, you're only going on a light tumble. So it's perfect to practice climbing buildings and just running all over the place. The nearest Yaoya explains, and his eyes go wide at the implications before a big smile goes across his face. Oh, this is gonna be fun, he exclaims, and they look shocked at his eagerness. Oh, come on. You can't tell me that none of you have been tempted to simply scale the nearest buildings and were only held up by the fact that a single slip could kill you if weren't arrested just for trying. Well, someone's eager. Get over here so we can get you your emergency beacon so you can get in there then, the ticket seller says, and Herbert weaves through the crowd even as they part to let him to the front. She's an older Yaoya, so she's no doubt completely sure what they're all here for. Oh, wait, no, never mind, you can't be. Too young. She dismisses him as a tret civilian instead of a human soldier before pulling out a snap-on bracelet. He holds out his wrist and it's slapped into place. Go on. No doubt your girls will think it's more sporting if you've got a head start. The woman teases, and Herbert glances back to the group. They're all smiling eagerly and a few are nodding. Go, go, go. We want to chase. One of them cheers and he nods before racing into the zone. He's cute. How did you girls get so lucky? The seller asks, and Herbert smirks as he takes a left, then jogs in place for a bit to keep listening. We were registered with the Janir arrangement system. There was a bit of a mix-up and everything was rushed and then locked in, and we're doing this backwards. You're supposed to seduce and lure in your husband before you marry him, not after. At this point, Herbert nods to himself before sprinting off. He needs to get some distance before getting his sneak on. There are a bunch of miniature towers. If he were to consider this architecture anything, it seems almost Japanese in its methods. Thin walls with clear breakaway panels on sturdy towers that go up about 5 to 6 stories on average. They don't have the characteristic swoop or deep varnishing, but more squares with the edges sanded down and covered in pale paints. Cream and taupe are common. The hairs on the back of his neck stand out and he looks around to spot something round, highlighted against a breakaway wall, so he slips into the tower. A ladder going up is the central feature of the room. Convenient. He races upwards and stops on the 5th floor. Then he slams the sliding breakaway door open and then grabs Harriet before she falls out. He pulls her back in. The spy is dressed in a loose shirt with vest and high boots with her hair dyed fluorescent purple. What? The fuck are you doing here? He demands her and is met with a glare. Initiation into a cult I'm infiltrating. What are you doing here? She hisses at him. Date with my wives. They've got a hunting fetish. They're hunting you. Yes, what's your initiation? Successfully spy on a man and his girlfriends and take notes with film. Fine, use me and I'll give them some excuse if you get caught. Twisted ankle. You claim I've got one but don't want to spoil the fun. I'll tell the cult I tricked you. Now get out of here. Okay, but bear in mind your ass was sticking out. What? Your ass is just as huge as your tits, he states as he pulls out a disc, steps to the side, and bounces it off her rear. Your ass was sticking out, he states before dodging a swing from her. Just leave, she says. And he puts up his hands and opens the door before racing out and leaping to the rooftop of the shorter nearby building. She slams the door shut afterwards. Kinda nice to have a girl react normally. I'm still getting used to the galaxy at large. Just remember that I'm nearby if you need emergency extraction. I'm armed and ready, he says into his communicator while holding down the short-range toggle. Confirmed. Also, if you bounce a coin off my ass again, I'm feeding it to you, she swears. 10-4, he says with a chuckle before racing along the rooftop and leaping to a nearby tree that had been grown to have large, stable branches. He races along it before leaping to another building. A hunt is just no fun if it's easy. Wah! A strange woman that's a fuzzy ape being in a bikini protests as he rushes by. She has a long tail that splits into 3 and deep brownish-red fur. Sorry, he remarks, grabbing her by the flailing arm and pulling her back onto the roof. Some distance back, he can see a blur heading his way. One of his girls is closing in. He needs some distance and a visual block to get anything done. Oh, he says with a grin on his face. He's got no real illusion as to what they're going to do with him if he's caught. He's also kind of curious. The claws on the sides of their faces that make them look almost crab-like at first actually have some plump lips when they're not too shy to hide them. Apparently, the cheek claws evolved so they could eat even while their hands were full while climbing and stalking.